everyone. So we're going to get started so we can end on time as well. Thank you for your quietness. My name is Cheryl Walton. I am the secretary for the Coalition for Police Accountability. And I'm very interested in all that we're trying to do for our community here because my background is in public health. And public health is what we're trying to improve, our quality of life for all of us here. So in February, the Coalition for Police Accountability organized a hearing for the Oakland Police Commission. Over 60 unhoused Oakland residents testified on their experiences of policing in Oakland. Many experienced the desire to have less interaction with police and told stories of harassment and unconstitutional policing which make their lives more difficult and harrowing. The Coalition for Police Accountability found funding and worked with graduate students at the Goldman School of Public Policy, researching how city policies affect our unhoused neighbors. And there's a report, a summary right here tonight if you would like to look at it.
It's in your folder.
It's in my folder. Very good. The need for compassion, appropriate responses is reflected throughout the report. Urban Strategies Council coordinated research interviews as part of the Department of Violence Prevention, which is one of our programs here in Oakland, which found Oakland residents expressing over and over and over that there are times they need help and yet want a non-police alternative to call. When the conclusions of the investigations into police killing of Joshua Pollack showed that OPD had learned nothing from previous killings of sleeping residents, we began looking at solutions used in other jurisdictions. We believe that the model of Cahoots can be the basis for a transformative program which is designed with community participation to meet the needs and reflect the Oakland community. Let's thank our co-sponsors, the Oakland Police Commission, Faith in Action, East Bay, East Bay, isn't it? Oh, Faith in Action, it used to be called OCO. I got it. Council President Rebecca Kaplan, there she is, who is chair of our Public Safety Committee. Council Member Noel Gallo, Urban Strategies Council, and my organization, the Coalition for Police Accountability. I also want to recognize our City Council person, Lauren Taylor from District 6, is in the house as well. So it is my honor to introduce City Council President Rebecca Kaplan. When we first brought the idea of building a model of non-police responses, she was an immediate and enthusiastic advocate. We could not ask for a stronger proponent of police accountability and constitutional policing in Oakland. Rebecca.
Yay!
President.
Good evening. Good evening. Okay, we're going to do that one more time. Good evening. Good evening. All right, now we're in Oakland. As you've heard, my name is Rebecca Kaplan, and I have the incredible honor to serve the entire city of Oakland as your council member at large. And yes, thank you. And in addition to being your council member at large, this year I was elected by my colleagues unanimously in January to be all of our council president for the city council for this term. So yes, it is an auspicious time.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you. And since we are also with the church, I thought I'd open with something from Isaiah chapter 58. So the prophet Isaiah interrupts the people in the middle of the prayer service and says to the people, God is not impressed with your praying and wailing if you're not taking action to help the homeless, if you're not doing something to lift up those who are struggling. And so I share that because it is so important that we not only speak about our values of compassion, of having a non-militarized response for people who are struggling, of having support for our homeless, but that we put that into action as well. And I am so pleased to have been supporting this effort around an alternative to police as the way we respond to mental health incidents, and to be working with community for the last several months to fight for the funding for the pilot study to allow this model to be tested in Oakland. And this Monday night, we won that effort. We won the pilot funding that we have been talking about to enable the start of this program. And so I think that's important to share too, and that is thanks to the work of a lot of people. We also won funding for self-governed homeless encampments and strengthening grassroots community response. So this is a testament to a lot of hard work, a lot of advocacy, and our work is not done. We still have to continue to fight both for the things that weren't funded yet and to make sure the things that are funded are implemented. And so I really want to thank all the sponsors and the speakers here tonight to talk about those kind of next steps and what it really means on the ground to build a mental health model based on health, to build a model of human response based on compassion. And thank you for bringing that here, and thank you to everybody who sponsored it. It's a pleasure to work with all of you, and may it continue. Good evening.
Big round of applause for our favorite council president. Good evening, my name is Servant B.K. Woodson. I am the Director of Clergy Development at Faith in Action East Bay. I'm also an organizer for that organization formerly known as OCO. I'll be your moderator tonight. I just want to ask if we, when we get to that question and answer portion, that we are respectful of each other and our time like we do. We share a hope, I believe, that we can change our world, that we can change our city. And I just want to encourage and remind us that we are the ones we've been waiting for. Tim Black is the operations coordinator for White Bird Clinic's Kahoot mobile crisis program, and has been a crisis intervention worker with the program since 2010. He also serves on the board of directors for Eugene's community-supported shelters. Prior to Cahoots, Tim has worked in the street outreach, case management, and crisis services for runaway and homeless youth in Lane County, as well as wilderness therapy and outdoor education. Chelsea Swift has been a crisis counselor on Cahoots since 2016. She is also the Cahoots Agency Outreach Coordinator, providing crisis de-escalation training sessions for social service agencies, local businesses, and neighborhood coalitions. Chelsea trains community members to better navigate crises that inevitably unfold throughout the community, and how resources like local law enforcement, emergency medical services, and Cahoots can be best utilized when or if necessary. Prior to Cahoots, Chelsea has experience providing outreach and harm reduction services to marginalized communities experiencing homelessness, addiction, and mental illness in Eugene and the Bay Area. She is a former outreach counselor at the Homeless Youth Alliance in San Francisco, where she was John Pollock's case manager from 2014 to 2015. They are seated now, and I'm going to ask them to now get relaxed, stand up, and give us a presentation that will knock our socks off. Please give them a hand as they come.
Also, there's a red Honda blocking the exit for the parking lot. Also, Josh Pollock's case manager.
Wow. Thank you so much for all coming here tonight to listen to what we have to share with you. Thank you for those generous introductions. This is going to be a lot of information. We realize that, and so we're going to try and just get everybody through it. There's a lot to talk about. Chelsea and I have been talking about this for 2 days, and we could go on for 2 more months. We're going to start with a little bit of history on Whitebird Clinic. Whitebird Clinic is a collective environment organized to enable people to gain control of their social, emotional, and physical well-being through direct service, education, and community. Whitebird Clinic has 4 basic tenets that drive all of our programs, all of our services. That is client-centered services, employing a harm reduction model, utilizing trauma-informed care, governed with a consensus-based collective. Well, that's formatting is a little weird, but we'll work with it anyway. Whitebird Clinic was started in 1969, informed by a lot of the same governing principles and driving forces in the community that led to the development of the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic here in the Bay Area. Through our establishment initially as a crisis center, we eventually incorporated as a federally qualified health center, which meant that we were able to add medical and dental services, counseling, homeless case management, behavioral health, outpatient treatment, substance abuse and treatment. And it is that large network, that relationship with the community that led to the development in 1989 of the Cahoots program. For 20 years, Whitebird Clinic had been offering services to the community as long as people were able to come to them, able to call them on the phone, able to walk through their front doors. But that doesn't work for everybody. Not everyone can pick up a phone and say, I need help. Not everyone is physically able to make it to that location, to get through that front door to receive those services. And Whitebird saw a need for something in the community. We affectionately referred to it initially as the Bummer Squad, which was, if you were having a rough time and you were having a bummer and you needed Whitebird, if we had the volunteers, if we had the resources, and someone could alert us to your need in the community, we would send you someone out there. But Whitebird Clinic wanted to do something more. We wanted to have something more formal, something more structured, something that was engaged and responsive to the entire community. Simultaneously, the Eugene Police Department was looking at this crazy new idea of community policing and the need for partnerships with mental health organizations, with social service providers throughout the community to really effectively prevent folks from getting engaged with law enforcement, from getting engaged with public safety simply because they were having a hard time. And so in 1989, on July 4th, the very first Cahoots team went out. We started off really slim, just running a few nights a week, a few hours a night, just trying to get there, be there for folks when we could. Through the 90s and into the 2000s, we eventually expanded our services to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And eventually, as you can see here, I'll keep it brief. Sorry, there's a lot of information in here. Over an extended period of time, we've gotten to the point where we now have 24-hour coverage, not just in Eugene, but also in Springfield, our neighboring community, which means that we have resources to respond to 220,000 people in need at any given time, day or night. Right now, obviously, we're here talking with you. We're trying to take this model that we have and bring it to other communities because we really believe that we have a 30-year track record of success in preventing crisis from escalating to the point where law enforcement is necessary.
Okay, so a big thing about our services is that they are voluntary. That does not mean that we are volunteers. That means that we will never force anybody to do anything against their will. That is both because we don't have that power given to us, but also because that doesn't work. When you make a decision for somebody, you are not setting them up for success in the same way under a harm reduction model. When you make the same services available every time and allow that person to make the decision for themselves, you are supporting them in what their path is and should be. We are really well known in the community for our de-escalation skills. So as was mentioned before, a lot of that looks like giving presentations and trainings in the community so that when community members are calling us for our services, they're gonna be able to interact with each other better. And also what keeps us safe, and we'll talk more about that. We always are looking for the least necessary intervention. Again, one of those things that looks great on paper, that means if we're diverting the emergency room, we're diverting a $1,600 ambulance ride, that can sell it. But also, if we are enabling people to take control in their own environment, then they have the skills, like we're helping people build the neurological pathways of change within themselves. And then maybe instead of calling us every day, we give them the support and we start hearing from them once a month. We talked about this a little bit in the meeting before this, but one of our mantras in our work is, can we have an unconditional positive regard for everybody that we work with? This is a lot harder. It's a lot harder to be the force of de-escalation in a conflict, not be reactive to insults, hate speech. It's harder. It's why it takes 4 or 5 months to train on this job, but to truly get the outcome of de-escalation without violence, without enforcement, without outcomes that we're all trying to prevent, to be able to have positive regard and remain the respectful force in the intervention gets us all the outcomes we need, and that takes a lot of patience and time. Okay, so this is going to be a very wordy slide, and the only one I'm gonna probably refer to some notes, but the scope of our work is really profound. So crisis counseling, that can be somebody calling for themselves on the worst day of their lives. Their partner died, they got fired from their job, they are completely, profoundly under-resourced. That could also be somebody's roommate threw away their toothbrush. And so people can define what crisis is for us, for themselves. This can also be requested by a roommate, a family member, somebody who's requesting mediation. This also looks like teachers in schools who want us to come and de-escalate a student in their classroom. This looks like us showing up at a PCP's office who somebody was in for a general exam and they're suicidal, and the PCP is like, this isn't my expertise. Or they don't work with this a lot, so they kind of freak out, call public safety, and we show up and we're able to say, well, maybe the traumatizing experience of going to the emergency room isn't totally what this person needs just because they mentioned self-harm or suicidal ideation. Having an over-response can actually be more stigmatizing. This person has these thoughts every single day, and if their physician is saying, the thing that you told me is so concerning that I called 911 and I think you need to be in a locked room, they probably will not create a relationship in which that person is going to disclose that again. So just because a physician or a psychiatrist calls us with an outcome in mind, when they call us, they're saying, it's your outcome. So there's a lot of like, whose crisis is it? Is it the client's crisis or the caller's crisis? Suicide prevention is a huge percentage of our call volume, and comes up blatantly, or sometimes it presents itself on a call. So it's something that we as a team spend a lot of time developing our ethics around, our approaches around, and it's also something we take really seriously because we have been given the responsibility of the outcomes of suicidal subject calls in our public safety system that otherwise every single time would be a law enforcement officer showing up at this person's doorstep. So similar to above, this can be somebody calling for themselves. This can be somebody out of state who saw that somebody made a suicidal comment on social media and they're requesting a welfare check, and maybe we show up and this is the first time somebody has ever engaged with the mental health system, ever talked to a counselor. We're not only experts who are able to provide counseling and empathy, but we're also very aware of the access and resources that exist. So we know that for some people, a hospital visit is absolutely necessary to keep themselves safe and might get them placement in an inpatient setting. We know for a lot of people that is absolutely not what they need, so we have knowledge and friends at every other social service agency in town that we will try to, again, least intervention necessary. And then we're avoiding potentially traumatizing interactions with those systems that maybe somebody doesn't need that today, but maybe in 2 weeks they need it. If they're not being brought to the emergency room every single time, then we're helping that go well for when it's necessary. When that does happen, so if we believe that somebody is profoundly a danger to themselves or others, which is not a decision that we make lightly, and somebody is not willing to go with us to access care, which is like our magic skills, really. We try to make that a voluntary choice for them, but if we have to get somebody to the hospital, we believe that they are a danger to themselves or others, that's when we would engage with law enforcement, but that's not us surrendering the call to law enforcement. That is us saying, we kind of need your power to take people's rights away that we're otherwise not interested in. And then we're gonna follow them to the hospital. We are going to give a full patient report to the crisis worker, to the nursing staff. We're gonna say, I know that you're maybe seeing this person in the ER twice a month, but I've been with them twice already today, and we tried other things and it didn't work. And sometimes that advocacy is what changes and gets that person that inpatient placement and the meds that they've been trying to get on their own for a very long time, which is probably contributing to the hopelessness. The flip side of that is that a lot of community members call 911 and express suicidal ideation because that is where we have accepted we are at as a community or culture. A lot of people don't know how else to express their profound need for everything. So sometimes calls come in as a suicidal subject and we end up helping somebody get a meal at the local shelter, and we give them time, validation, space, and we're able to de-escalate and find, like, maybe that suicidal ideation was there, but is that the presenting crisis? And respecting people's choices around that. So conflict resolution, that's at homes, that's at shelters, that's within roommates, that can result in mitigating like something that might have otherwise resulted in an eviction. Maybe we can resolve a situation on scene and prevent somebody from having this long-term outcome, or we would probably start seeing them a lot more. We deliver, so grief and loss, we deliver death notifications that in other places you would have an officer showing up on your door telling you that your loved one died out of district. We get to deliver that news, and then we get to stay, and we're gonna stay until that's resolved, whatever that looks like for the person. That can also look like us being on the scene of a completed suicide or a death in the field, whether medics were on scene or not. So all of these agencies respond in these deeply traumatizing situations, and the fire department clears after law enforcement has arrived, and law enforcement does their investigation and hangs out until the medical examiner comes, and all the while this person is grieving with these strangers in uniforms with weapons in their home. And maybe all of the equipment that was disposable to the fire department is still laying around the person's house, and then medical examiner leaves after 2 hours, and now the person is just left with utter grief and a mess to clean up. So this can be some of our longest calls where we stay with somebody throughout that entire process and help them navigate, whether it's like helping them make some phone calls to get a friend over, or helping them clean up, or helping them get cat food that they need because they're like, I'm gonna leave town. Okay, we're gonna go to the store and get you cat food. Like, we will do whatever. We love to get creative. Okay, so welfare checks, this is another big one. This can be from a subject down call, somebody possibly having a medical emergency, or somebody who is just sleeping. People love to call in these calls, and then when the dispatcher asks them, like, great, so are they conscious and breathing? Oh, no, I want them to get help, but I was too afraid to get close enough to see if they were breathing. So that's a big chunk of our work. Welfare checks also look like, my friend just sent me this really weird out of character message, or I haven't heard from grandma in 6 weeks. I live in Florida. Sometimes we show up and grandma's like, it's the craziest thing. I just can't get my iPhone to work. And we're like, great, plug in. Actual call I've been on, I cried afterwards because it was so beautiful, because the fire department had been there twice already that day. Fire department had been there already, and they medically evaluated her as stable. Me and my teammate who's in the audience, who lives in Sacramento now, were on that call, and while our trainee went through the iPad, the iPhone, the iMac, we started looking around and we realized, oh, there's all these medical appointments on her calendar. Oh, she's going to the Cancer Institute. Oh, she totally has brain cancer, and her kid who lives with her is at a tattoo appointment. Here's his number. Great, you're on your way home. Boom, no more pressing her, help me, I've fallen and I can't get up button today. But sometimes for grandmas who don't have that fall, help me get up button, we do find them down. We find people who have been down for days on their living room floor, or we do sometimes find people who are deceased. Substance abuse is just like, that can apply to anything that I've just described, but we also are able to transport people to our sobering center, so that's like a step down from the emergency room where someone can just lay down and sleep, since our only shelter in town is a zero tolerance drug and alcohol policy. Also a lot of counseling around this, a lot of connecting people to resources, letting them know what exists. Often people call us at midnight and they finally convince their boyfriend to go to detox, and we have to be the voice that says, well, I'm so glad you called and we're so happy to meet you, but there's no immediate access to substance treatment, and I'm so sorry that the day that you really needed it and the day that you were ready to make that change, it doesn't exist. But almost always those interactions still end in a positive way, that we are able to provide support, provide something. Harm reduction, first aid and non-emergency medical care. So we'll talk about our model, but what is unique about the way Cahoots operates is that we are always a crisis worker medic duo. A lot of us are both roles. So crisis worker means like you've got the X factor of being able to talk to all sorts of people, not necessarily have a degree or a license. Our medics are at least an EMT basic, but we have some paramedics. We have a nurse who works on the team who's also in our local ER, which is really helpful. And a lot of folks, we end up doing crazy wound care for people who got amputations and are on the street, and the wound center that they've been referred to go to every day is a town away, and they're not allowed on the bus because our bus system 86s people for life who are unhoused. So we might do ongoing wound care to prevent infection that could otherwise kill the person. We do medical evals, oftentimes agencies like our mission or the overnight crisis center will allow us to be the medical clearance. So if we take vitals and we're I know you have that gnarly wound, we know that you've had that gnarly wound for 6 months, you're fine. We'll report back to the staff that this person is cool to stay, and then again, we're avoiding expensive ambulance ride. And an expensive ER visit where a lot of our clients are not treated well. Resource connection referrals, we connect people to everything everywhere. We can transport to any staff service, so when EMS shows up on scene, they can transport somebody to the hospital or they can do nothing. When the police department shows up on scene, they can transport people to jail or to the hospital for a mental health crisis that rises to that level, or do nothing. We can go to a variety of different places to meet needs. And then last one, thank you for hanging on for this long slide, but it's really important that we show this full scope because there's even just so much more. Domestic violence and family disputes. So this would be like a type of call that maybe law enforcement does respond. It got violent. The person who was attacked may or may not want to press charges. Maybe they just want to leave for the night. They don't know what that looks like. We might help facilitate transport to a motel or get the teenage kid to a shelter if the adults are not interested in taking space. Yeah, we do. That's like one that is very outcome led by what the client wants. Okay, so there's no need to go through these name by name, but so Eugene has a population of about 160,000. Our team has about like 45-ish people who are on the van at any given point. And at all of these places are former, future, or current coworkers and friends and partners. So it's not like, oh, here, we'll bring you to a shelter. We're gonna call the shelter, convince them to give you a bed, we're gonna get you there, we're gonna stop and get your medication on the way at the local pharmacy. Oh, you don't have health insurance? Well, my friend works in the department that signs people up for Medicaid. While you're there, let's do this. So resource connection as a form of diversion for everything is so valuable, and that this is not the most glamorous part of our work, having to advocate to an agency for the 6th time who has not followed through, but we do it because we know that even though we are crisis response, if we can connect them to an agency that provides things more long-term, then we're helping everyone. Okay, so Whitebird Clinic, as Tim mentioned before, is a collective, and we are employees of Whitebird. We do not work for the city, we do not work for law enforcement. We are a department of an agency that is contracted by the city of Eugene in our Eugene operation, and by Lane County for our Springfield teams. We are so different, each and every one of us, special little things that we bring to the table. So, like I said, we have a nurse in the hospital, we have clinical social workers who work in the hospital and in local schools. We have folks who work in other departments in our agency, which is rad. Case managers, people who work at the medical clinic. And our training process, medics have to have an EMT license, so that's a process mandated by the state. But our crisis work training is very specific to us, so we look for folks who have at least 2 years experience in the field. One of our really fun recent hires was a bartender at this bar in a neighborhood that we spend a lot of time in. So she was like super culturally competent, knew the clientele. She's not coming from a clinical educational background, and that makes her really good at this job. And we're paid staff. When often we say we're a voluntary service and people are like, wow, you do this for free. It takes 5 months to train someone if they make it through that process. We are extremely centered on that process. So by the time you make it through, like, we want you to hang out for a while, so we're gonna pay you, because consistency is really helpful.
Yeah, so as Chelsea mentioned, that training process takes 4 or 5 months, that averages out to well over 500 hours of in-field training. That's riding as the third person on a team and slowly applying your skills in the position you were hired for. So, for instance, when I started training as a crisis worker, my first day on the van, I rode and I observed. After a week or two, I started responding on the radio to dispatch and writing reports, initiating the contacts, and slowly building the skills that it took to really be effective in my role as a crisis intervention worker and to learn how to be a part of that crisis medic team. We have a mentor-guided process, which means that at every turn, at every time that you have that really difficult call, or you're just trying to figure out how you can work through that team dynamic because you got stuck on training shifts with a medic and crisis worker who maybe have been working together a little too long. Having that feedback and that resource, that person who can sit down with you one-on-one and do skills labs if you need to work on checking blood pressure or maybe learning how to introduce yourself to somebody while also checking respiratory rate. Those sorts of things. A mentor can really facilitate a lot of that process and provide dynamic feedback. And oftentimes there's somebody that our trainees are going to be working with semi-regularly in the field as well. We have a lot of dual discipline opportunities, as Chelsea mentioned. A lot of our medics will come to us thinking, I'm just gonna do wound care and get really into community paramedicine, but then they realize that they have their own knack for talking to folks and that they wanna really engage more with the mental health side of the crisis. And so we have classes in-house and can assist folks with classes elsewhere too, to gain the skills and the knowledge to become a crisis worker in addition to a medic. We also have donations that allow us to be able to send some of our crisis workers, like Chelsea, through the EMT program so that we end up with these folks who are really able to, function in either of those roles, be there to respond when we have a coverage need, but also just provide better quality care in whatever their primary role is out in the field. We also provide continuing education for our folks to make sure that everybody's up to date on, best practices for wound care or, maybe how to access this new service in town by providing skills labs and services, sending folks and presenting at conferences and seminars, and really just this beautiful network of informal information sharing. There are email groups called, one of them, cool stuff. So anytime you find a new cool article about this new progressive form of treatment, or somebody writes a really beautiful first-person perspective of what it was like, their narrative of interacting with law enforcement during a mental health crisis, we use that as a means to really make sure that we're really staying on top of what's going on, not just in our community, but nationally. One of the big questions that come up is, how do we do this? And so that's, what's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? Yep, right? As of fiscal year 2018, total cost of our operations for 24/7 service in Eugene and Springfield comes out to right around $1.5 million. We're in the process of working with the city of Eugene to increase that total operational cost to $1.9 million as we add 11 more service hours to our Eugene area. In Eugene, our services are funded exclusively by the Eugene Police Department. We're a line item in the materials and services budget, which means that anytime there is any sort of impact on our funding, it has to go through City Council. When there was a budget crisis, they wanted to look at cutting Kahoot services, they had to go to City Council to say, what can you shave off? And they said a half hour a day, because they saw that need there. When the chief of police said, I need more Kahoots, City Council said, how much? We've been very lucky to have that relationship since 1989. In 2013 and 2014, we were really looking for ways to get into the smaller community of Springfield, which is just across the river from us. It was this area, smaller, lower socioeconomic status, high need, but no access to the resources that were available just across the river. And if you couldn't ride that bus, then you couldn't get us. We had some people who were lucky enough to have a car. They would call us on their cell phone while they were driving over the bridge and say, I'm going to be meeting you in the McDonald's parking lot in half an hour because I'm feeling suicidal and I need to talk to somebody and you can't come to me yet. The state of Oregon started to see a need for mobile crisis services and wanted that to look like the co-responder model. They wanted it to look like maybe two clinicians showing up in a sedan using a hotline. And we said, we really think that this model is going to work in Springfield, but you need to give us a chance. And we had to really fight and lobby to convince the state of Oregon to apply that Oregon Performance Plan funding to our model in Springfield. And so for the last 4+ years, about 4.5 years, we've been over there operating in a pilot phase with all of our funding coming from Lane County Health and Human Services via the Oregon Performance Plan Mobile Crisis Funding. We're currently working with the city of Springfield to increase their contribution financially to our services over the next 5 years so that we can then apply that county funding to the entire county rather than just focusing on the metropolitan area. Because there are another 40 or 50,000 people who have chosen, maybe to live in a more rural setting. They deserve to have the same access to care as folks that are in the major metropolitan area. How do you get us? That's a huge question. We are built into the public safety dispatch infrastructure. So what that means is requests for service come in from the community, whether that's you calling in because you need assistance or you calling in on behalf of somebody else in your community. We tell people to call the non-emergency line because we're a non-emergency service, but because we're integrated into public safety, even those 911 calls that are coming in, maybe because someone doesn't have minutes on their cell phone, or as Chelsea mentioned, we're just conditioned as a society to reach out to 911 when we feel that we have an emergency. So all those calls come through the dispatch center. Call takers triage to determine acuity, priority, and appropriateness for our level of service, and then use non-priority police channels. We carry a police radio with us and are dispatched over air. That means that officers know where we are so they can potentially steer clear of us, or know that if we call because the situation just gets too hairy and we need their assistance, they can be here to help us right away because we're not armed. We don't carry a taser, we don't carry pepper spray. We rely on our rapport with the community and our ability to communicate with folks to really de-escalate most of our situations. So, crisis happens, a team gets dispatched. It's identified that this is a mobile crisis service need. Sometimes that means Cahoots directly, sometimes that means the fire department or the police showing up first and saying, yep, this is Cahoots all the way, and calling us in so that they can clear the scene. We come in, we'll de-escalate and assess the situation, and if no transport is necessary, then we're going to work on resolution and referrals right there in the field to stabilize somebody. If transport is needed, typically the places that we're going to take folks are either the hospital, shelter services, or any number of our other community service partners. When we talk about this resolution and stabilization, for us, we're not outcome driven. A successful interaction is one that means Cahoots was the only first responder that showed up on scene. And a successful stabilization might mean for the next 2 hours, they don't call us again. That's all we're looking for. We're really just trying to work with somebody in the moment, provide, like Chelsea said, the least intervention necessary to get them, get them through whatever's going on in that moment.
Okay, so worker safety, this is a question that comes up a lot. And as somebody who comes from a harm reduction outreach background and never expected to be in this weird public safety role, I moved to Eugene and found myself wondering, what would this work have looked like when I worked in the Haight? What would this have looked like with my clients? Can this happen in a big city? We, in our training, we emphasize on scene awareness, and that is a huge part of our de-escalation trainings as well. We all do what I refer to as the empathy squat. So when someone's on the ground, you could spot a Cahoots team because we're all just there with them. But when we're doing that, we're thinking, okay, but we're still staying on our feet. We're not getting totally crisscross applesauce on the ground. We need to be able to get up, move as appropriate. We have awesome communication with each other. We spend a lot of time in close quarters with each other. We know each other's boundaries. We know each other's triggers, strengths, weaknesses. We have a rule in our work in our agency that when somebody sees you kind of losing sight or maybe breaking boundaries because you're getting attached to the outcome, usually, if somebody says, hey, I got this, or hey, we need to go, let's go check in outside, you don't debate that in front of the client or during the crisis, you talk about it later. So our radios, we wear a police radio. I listen to a police radio for 12 hours on a shift. That is very weird to me still, but it also is imperative for our safety. It also means that when we hear things going on in the community, we can offer ourselves. It also means we in turn can avoid situations that we hear going down with law enforcement. We sometimes have to call for cover, and that's almost always because of the safety of the client, not because we're concerned about our safety. We do defensive driving. We drive these giant Sprinter vans around, and so that looks like every time we park, we're parking. Do we have to back in to be able to leave? Are we parking around the corner for somebody that might be escalated by the fact that we parked outside of their house, and now they're like, in addition to my crisis, now all of the neighbors know that I am in crisis. Our appearance, so this works in like two different ways. So I wear what I wear almost in the community, which is Doc Martens, black pants, and a black t-shirt. But then when I put on this radio, I'm presenting in a way that whoever I'm interacting with is going to respond based on their experiences of what that they associate that radio with, from law enforcement to mall security to radio means authority. So we have to be really conscious around that. But we also are a bunch of weirdos with tattoos, which some people love and other people don't love. So it's professional, casual. We look very different than the fire department. We look very different than law enforcement. However, sometimes people see the radio and people ask me if I'm a cop. I'm like, they don't know. And for our safety to prevent burnout, we take care of ourselves. We debrief calls. I'm the type of person, I debrief every call after it has happened. So when I go home at the end of the day, my partner asks me how my day was, and I tell them, fine, how was yours? And spidey senses are like an absolute huge part of this job. So that can mean showing up to a welfare check and being like, I don't know why, but this is not the bathroom window I want to crawl through. And sometimes we find that there was a good safety reason for that. Okay, so this is the time where Ann Jenks reminds me to tell you that in all of your folders there is a note card that you can write questions down on throughout the presentation. If you need more note cards, there are people on either side of the room with note cards, and those are going to be how we facilitate Q&A later versus popcorn or question asking. So get in there. Okay, so in 2018, Cahoots responded to 24,000 requests for service. That means that we handled almost 20% of all external calls for service in our public safety system. At any given point, there is one Cahoots van on the road with 2 people working in it. At any given point in Eugene, there are a few dozen law enforcement officers, and we're still handling 20% of what's coming in. Approximately, so 3,300. So because the police pay for us in Eugene directly, they have the ability to request us over the radio, and that gets prioritized. But the point at which law enforcement is requesting us, they are kind of saying, this is your call now. This outcome is up to you. So we love when we get to come on scene and decide what happens, because then we have a lot of options of what that looks like. Of 24,000 calls in 2018, we only used that radio safety piece 150 times. And what that almost always means is not because we were scared, not because we were going to get hurt, but because we needed to access their powers for a peace officer hold for a suicidal subject or a psychotic subject that is profoundly unsafe. That is not a decision we make lightly, because that is antithetical to why we exist. And if it is a situation where perhaps things got a little out of control, maybe there was pushing or maybe there was a thing thrown, and we were in an unsafe situation, we can almost always identify that we probably broke one of our own boundaries. We probably got too close without making sure that the client understood what was going on. We can identify that maybe we were towering over them or creating a wall. Maybe we blocked their exit. Maybe we weren't totally empathetic and de-escalated ourselves. So in a situation where our safety is compromised, we can usually say, like, that was our bad. Okay, so while we do so much on Cahoots, we do not restrain people. We do not take people places against their will. So that is what you're looking at, those 150 calls only out of the 24,000. That's when we have to engage law enforcement. We do not provide transportation home. So that means if we find an intoxicated U of O student downtown, we're not just gonna bring her back to her boyfriend's house, who she swears is a great guy. He just abandoned her at the bar earlier tonight. Both because we cannot assure the safety of the place that we are bringing that client, and also because we don't want to be utilized as just a transportation service. We want to be available for things that would have bigger impact. And we do not judge. We are not fixing people.
So I want to be mindful of time. We really like to emphasize some of the specifics that we do. I'm going to kind of go through some statistics. If there's something that pops out at you, write it down on the card and we can talk a little bit more about it during the Q&A section. As Chelsea said, we're responding to over 60 calls per day in the Springfield, Eugene metro area. While about half of the folks that we interact with on a daily basis are unhoused, 40% of those folks have some sort of shelter. We provide, and we don't really care what your background is. We don't care who you are, how you identify, where you came from. If you're in need, we're going to be there. The way that our program is structured, we don't need to ask those questions about documentation, about status. You can go by Mickey Mouse today, Donald Duck tomorrow, doesn't matter to us. It's going to be the same service. Most of our calls come in, as you can see, kind of later in the afternoon, but we do spend most of the longest time on scene with folks earlier in the day when we're able to work with services to provide advocacy and resource connection. And this statistic, which comes from the Eugene Police Department, is what's really driving their desire and their need for increased Kahoot services, which is what we're working on bringing to them in the fall. These factors here can make up part of the reason that Kahoots is called. So almost 20% of the calls that we have involve severe and persistent mental illness in some capacity, but that could also be in tandem with that 10% of folks, give or take, who are needing food and water, access to basic needs. Those medical services may be related to alcohol and drug use. All of these things are interconnected, but for some of the funders and some of the number crunchers out there, we like to really identify that there is some separation, but these things can occur simultaneously. It's been our experience in our suicide interventions that the bulk of what's going on, what's leading up to that person reaching that point where they're feeling so desperate, is typically going to do with family or relationship issues, with grief and loss taking up another significant chunk, social media and bullying and harassment also contributing significantly. Of the suicidal interventions that we have, 68% of those responses only involve a Cahoots fan. 25% involve police in some capacity, and about 6% involve EMS and fire services as well. So this goes to show that the majority of the time when somebody is calling us and saying that, like, I'm feeling like ending it all, or there's whatever is going on, they're likely only going to see us. They're not going to need to worry about that law enforcement presence, that traditional public safety response that you might see in another community. 55% of the calls that we have with folks who are experiencing suicidal ideation are resolved on scene. That's 55% of those calls that don't need to go to the hospital, that don't end up in jail, that don't end up stigmatized by friends and family because they had to go somewhere else when they were having a bad day. Just over a third of our folks that we see who are experiencing suicidal ideation end up in the ER. But that tells you that 2/3 of those calls that were going on end up as an ER diversion. This slide I know is a little bit wonky, but as you can see, kind of on this top line here, this dark green line, the volume of Cahoots response is increasing disproportionately to the level of involvement from public safety in Eugene. That means that as our services grow, as our community increases in size, Cahoots is taking on more and more of a percentage of the total responses that are going on in our community.
Okay, so emergency room diversions. This is another thing that is really impacted by our model that has people who are trained in both mental health and medic stuff. So we do a lot of assessments, wound care as we talked about, sometimes, often with our clients who are housed, but maybe chronic mental health clients of agencies around town have lists of 20 medications that they don't remember what they have taken today, and we'll go through with that and check vitals as we're talking about the medications, looking at the bottles. This ER diversions for substance use usually looks like us bringing folks to our sobering center. Suicidal ideation, as we just talked about, failure to thrive, isolation and loneliness, so somebody who elsewhere might have gotten a police and fire response, might have gone to the emergency room. Maybe they needed us to come hang out with them for a little bit, and that is a crisis under our definition. Lift assists are a big thing that EMS world responds to, folks who just need help getting around because they are under-resourced, and we will help with that. And our chronic utilizers or frequent flyers, we have excellent rapport with, so we're able to provide ongoing care for them. Maybe we're their most constant medical provider that they see in the community.
Let's get this one.
Yeah. Okay, and jail diversion. So most of the calls that we're able to define that we've diverted somebody from jail is public intoxication. That is super in our purview, and that is a call that, like, sometimes law enforcement responds because it's called in as a trespass at a business. Somebody is intoxicated, fell asleep outside, or they're inside being fun, but not everyone's into it. So law enforcement might respond, maybe this person has warrants, but even law enforcement recognizes, okay, we brought this person to the county jail, who is so overran that oftentimes that looks like booking and releasing same day or in the same 24-hour period. We've all seen this person on this corner multiple times this week. I'm not going to run this person for their public intoxication tickets from the charges I gave them 2 days ago. Let's hand this over to you. Disorderly behavior, folks in traffic, disputes, trespassing. So that, again, there's a lot of crossover with these, and these are the types of calls that when we hear them going on in the community, like we hear, oh, there's a white male on the corner of that intersection wearing a red shirt, we know exactly who that is, and we are going to offer to put ourselves en route when we hear the police being sent as means to try to divert a jail transport. So, most of our transports are medical service, so that is why we need to have both workers on the van. This, again, a lot of our transports around this would be our sobering center. This is a big part of what we do every day on the van. And also our shelter in town and social services. And then, so this doesn't even capture the options that we are able to provide that are outside of that ER or jail option that exists otherwise in these calls that take place in the community. So we have a homeless problem that is not unique to our community, and that is kind of concentrated in our downtown area. And so the Eugene Police Department started a downtown specific police team, and in the few years after establishing that team, the sergeant who works down there said that she wanted to develop an outreach program where they could interact with somebody in a way that wasn't giving them tickets or arresting them, and so they solicited a partnership with us where we started doing some of the more case management, which is led by our model, and then also is able to have access to resources that law enforcement have. Maybe they're able to purchase somebody a bus ticket to reunite with family that our agency would otherwise not be able to afford. Maybe we're able to go alongside an outreach client to court, and because the law enforcement officer is there, they're going to clear all of the tickets they might not have cleared if just a peer support person came alongside with them. And we have some pretty, other than being familiar with all agencies, we have some really good relationships with certain ones. So community supported shelters that Tim is on the board of builds these Conestoga huts, which are very cheap, weather safe shelter that are placed in our community in churches. There are some sanctioned camps that are also self-governed. And the outreach project is in the process of placing 10 of them in the community to place their clients in. Okay, so both in our conversation tonight and in our conversations that we've had since being in Oakland on Monday are how do you all, not being a part of the county, have access to knowing who's accessing what, where your client's supposed to be, who's their PCP, what clinic are they attached to? Our database is our own, and it is confidential, and unless the proper channels have been accessed around gaining consent and release forms, we do not share our information with anyone. Other than when we are transferring care at a hospital or medical facility. And also we're crisis response, so we're just supposed to have the responsibility of what happens in a call. We drive away, and we're not case managing people. But we attend a lot of county-wide case conferencing meetings. So there is this funding that will come down, like there's one called the Frequent Utilizer System Engagement Housing Program, the FUSE program. And a list was generated by the county of the top 100 people who regularly engage in emergency room, jail, hospitals. And all 100 of those people were regular Cahoots clients. And so this program was handed to an agency with 2 new hires who have no name, face recognition with anyone on this list. So we get to go to these meetings where there's everyone around the table whose job it is supposed to be providing meds and primary care and case management and housing, and they're sitting at their desks and their agencies that are inaccessible to those 100 people on the list, and we're able to pull up our computer and say, great, you have not been able to find them. Well, we have seen them 7 times in the last 3 days, and they have been in this 1 square block radius. Would you like me to give you a ride so you can go meet our friend so-and-so? And we get to be really profoundly a part of people's journeys. A lot of my coworkers have been on the team for a decade, at least 5 years. Our longest standing coworker has been on the team for 15 years, which is half of Kahoot's entire existence. So people know us and we know them through their histories of being housed and then unhoused, and everything that comes with that span of time. So we're able to provide context that sometimes results in people getting the care they need. Sometimes it literally telling them that cross street gets the person housed. We're involved in commitment processes because with permission and safety as a concern, we're able to share our reports. We go to commitment hearings at times. Basically any county-wide meeting that is meant to address our clients were able to provide some invaluable insight on, because we're not seeing them Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. We are seeing them 24/7, 365.
In addition to all that work out in the field that Cahoots does, whether it's through the community outreach response team or our mobile crisis response, we also saw a need to really engage with youth, to change how young people talk about mental health, talk about housing, to talk about all of these different issues that come up, and really start to make some positive change. And through a partnership with one little alternative high school in Springfield, we started to develop what's now its own fully fledged program, separate from Cahoots, called Helping Out Our Teens in Schools, or Hoots, because we give a hoot for them. We started with one school just a couple of years ago, and now have clinics in 9 schools, which will be expanding to, I think, 12 schools starting in September. We offer at least 1 2-hour clinic a week in each of the schools where we have a presence, with that medic and that crisis worker, again, using that team model. Because sometimes it's easier as a young person, maybe you don't have that vocabulary yet. Maybe it's easier to say, my stomach's been hurting for 3 days, as opposed to, my anxiety's just through the roof and I've been depressed since my parents' divorce. This resource allows us to engage with young people, to show them that it's okay to reach out for help, to get in and talk with them before situations escalate, and really teach them when and how do you utilize Cahoots outside of this classroom setting. That relationship also allows us to support schools and school districts with rapid tragedy response. If there's a completed suicide, we're there for the postvention. We will hold day-long crisis clinics for as long as the school needs in order for their students and their faculty to feel supported. We build on that. A lot of what Chelsea does outside of her work on the van is community outreach and education, whether that's mental wellness, mental health first aid presentations, suicide awareness and intervention trainings, postvention activities, and de-escalation and compassionate communication workshops. We've started to get some recognition, and obviously that's why we're here now. But it's important for us to really highlight the other communities that are looking at this and that are having the same conversations that you are right now, so that you guys can all get a sense of the scope of the need and the desire to find a change and a really effective way to get law enforcement out of crisis services. We've supported the development of a program in Olympia, Washington that's been operating since April called the Crisis Response Unit. They're averaging 30 calls a day just in the first 3 months that they've been around. Portland, Oregon has been sending their mayor, city councilors, chief of police, fire department representatives to really look at how the Eugene and Springfield model of Cahoots can be applied on a larger scale to their community. And again, recognizing that by no means is Cahoots a cookie cutter program that you can just pick up and plop down in a community. All of these conversations are around, how does this service reflect the needs in your community, and how can you make something that fits your community's needs under something similar to what Cahoots is offering? We hosted a large contingent from Denver, including State Representative Leslie Herod, who came out for 3 days of systems analysis, community needs assessment, and meetings with other service providers, as well as representatives from our emergency room and the chief of police, to really look at what it was that was making this work for us and how Denver can replicate that. And a lot of that's being facilitated by the Denver Justice Project. We're also engaging with smaller rural communities throughout Oregon. As I mentioned earlier, the Oregon Health Authority was really resistant to this idea of having an EMT and a crisis worker together, and we had to push and push and push to get that in. Now we're writing the statutes for mobile crisis in our state, and have become the best practice model that is being pursued by smaller communities throughout our state. This gives you a quick example of some of the things that we do. Obviously, holding forums like this, going in, doing smaller meetings. We really try to, when we come in to support a new community, we're really looking to address the questions that come in at every level, which is why we met with Mayor Schaaf, why we met with OPD, OFD, and city councilors yesterday. There are other ways to get involved with Wiper too, and this really kind of wraps up the presentation. Folks, we're a nonprofit. Folks want to find ways that they can support us. One of the things that you can do is, if anybody this far south is familiar with the Oregon Country Fair, that is where the Cahoots model of that medic and crisis worker was really born. Oregon needed some sort of rock medicine. That should be a familiar idea to some folks in this room here, and that is still our largest fundraiser on a daily basis. We offer quarterly new volunteer training opportunities for folks who really want to learn about Cahoots, Whitebird, the consensus model, how a collective has organized to respond to the community needs. And we also allow folks to come in and assist us with community events for fundraising activities. This picture's up here just really to show you, this is just beautiful. This was all of our vans that we had in service one night. Each of us were bringing somebody to the ER, and then each of us took somebody away. So, thank you so much for coming here tonight. I'm really looking forward to questions we will have.
Awesome. May I have your permission to make one request? Can we just all take a deep breath in and let it out? Hurt a lot. I want to ask you just for 1 second, maybe 2. Imagine Oakland with a program like Cahoots. Just imagine it for a minute. Imagine the chief of police in Oakland, whoever that will be at the time, at city council saying, we need more money for Cahoots. Imagine this Oakland police budget has 30, 35, 40, 50% of its budget to programs like this. Now let's breathe one more time. Breathe in. Breathe out. So let's make that happen. We have a couple of questions for you.
Yeah.
And a lot of you are asking the same questions, and I'll go card by card. Most cards have about 2 questions. So, what do schedules look like? Sounds like 12-hour shifts, but how are they distributed among the staff? Do you rotate overnights, etc.? And second part of the question is, with the drunk college student example, how would you end that call? More broadly, how do you determine where someone goes if you don't take them?
Cool. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, definitely. Does this work? Yeah, okay. So our shifts are exactly broken up into either 6 or 12-hour increments. A full-time position with us typically looks like working 3 12-hour shifts over the course of a week. Some of that's to adjust worker burnout. That means that you get 4 days off. This is a hard job, to say the least. We have a lot of folks that work part-time for us, and that kind of that 36 hours making a full-time position allows us to give our team members an opportunity to be involved in administration, committees, and other aspects of programming, either on Cahoots or throughout Whitebird Clinic, without really, worrying about going into overtime. And it is what it is. We're a nonprofit. We got to keep the costs down where we can, and so that's how we've addressed our scheduling. Some folks love overnights and will just work. That's all they want. That's all. Chelsea is one of those. Other folks, we'll work with them to find a rotating schedule where maybe every 6 months, we'll try and switch you from working afternoons and evenings to, more of a early morning and daytime shift. Our scheduling, along with everything else, is also a collaborative process. So we're constantly talking about what is it that each individual staff member needs and how can we work together to support and address that. If somebody is the single parent in a household, how can we help make sure that their schedule accommodates their childcare needs? It's a dynamic process. It takes a lot of back and forth and a lot of committees to make it happen.
As for our drunk friend downtown, so this might look like an emergency room visit that might happen. This also might look like me taking her thumb and putting it on her iPhone and seeing who she calls the most and calling them and finding out if they're sober, able to drive, come get her, agreed to take care of her, a contract for safety of calling us back if an emergency arises. This might look like looking for mom and dad's number. Is it a local area code? Hacking into her Instagram, we get creative and we have the grace and ability of time. We're not just going to say all right, let's load you in the van, get you to the hospital, because it doesn't need to be like that. waking up with an IV in your arm, even if you're the most privileged person in the world, that's going to be disorienting and unnecessary some of the time. Also, so like with that person, since I gendered her as female, our sobering center in town actually has a pretty small capacity, which only has 2 secure rooms that a woman could access. And then we also think about safety and would that person be appropriate to bring to that service? Because if we bring them, it's voluntary, they can leave. Will they be safe if they make that decision? So there's a lot of factors that we communicate through, both with ourselves and the person. We're always communicating with them what we are doing.
Awesome, awesome. So please, we are passing around a sign-up. So if you want ongoing information about the effort to bring this kind of program to Oakland, please sign. We'll give you information, or you want to be a part of that, please sign up. Okay? So coming from an ambulance paramedic background, who and how is a medical call, assigned to Cahoots versus EMS? And does traditional EMS avoid a call by passing them to Cahoots? And yes, this is making sense to you, right?
Yeah.
You get it all?
Yeah.
Right. And is this positive? And as a paramedic, all patients reporting thoughts of suicide had to be transported. So, you got it.
Cool. So again, as somebody, I never expected to be in this world of public safety EMS at all. And even when I started on Cahoots 2.5 years ago, I was like, this crisis work will be awesome, but I will never be able to be a Cahoots medic. And now I just finished the EMT program. And so a Cahoots call that would organically be like a medical call that we can be accessed for is somebody who is saying, I want an eval, but I'm refusing medics. So they have that right to request us, even if it's something that would otherwise follow under the EMS purview. Similar to safety concerns for us when we're coming on scene of a crisis, they also have to look at like, okay, if I'm following my dispatch triage guidelines and your presenting problems are one that I have to send an ambulance for because this all is checking every box for a cardiac issue, that might happen, and they might kind of spend some time counseling that with the person who's calling. That might also be a situation. Very frequently, we're still sent in tandem, so we are still there, and we're going to facilitate that interaction even if EMS is taking the lead. Yes, they call us all the time. They love to call us, and we love that as well. Until I went through our local EMT program at our local community college, like whenever you see somebody who works for the fire department, they are like, Cahoots, thank you, we love you so much. And I've always just been like, okay, thank you, you don't have, like that's nice, thank you so much. But I had to do a ride along with them as part of my program, and seeing their work and all the effort it takes to get their ambulance out and their gear just to find somebody who's intoxicated and refusing to go with them anyway, I'm like, they really mean those thank yous. They really mean thank you. And so something that I didn't touch on is also like with our same ability to flag down for a crisis or intoxication thing, we hear things in the community all the time. If we hear of an overdose and we're nearby, that's not something that Cahoots will be dispatched to primarily, but it's something we are absolutely equipped to respond to. And the fire department might be being sent from across town and we're around the corner, and so now we're administering Narcan and we're taking vitals and helping secure the person's airway if that's necessary. We're gonna do all of the things while they are still en route. Sometimes that overdose is not an overdose at all, and we're able to say like, you can disregard the medics, and then they get to move on to other calls. That also, we come across things that have happened before a call has even taken place. We might come across an MVC, vehicle versus pedestrian car accident. I have crisis counseled somebody who is hanging upside down in their car waiting for the fire department and police to respond because we were around the corner and we saw a car accident. We have the skills and ability to respond. We're going to stop and be a part of public safety in that situation.
Wow, this sounds more and more like something we have to have. How much control do callers have over whether Cahoots or cops are dispatched? And this writer has heard feedback about folks calling for Cahoots, but yeah, but getting cops instead. And finally, how does being funded through the police influence structurally your organization or Cahoots? And does it impact it at all? Why not, or if it does? Or why not independent funding? Why?
Those are fantastic questions. So on the question of Kahoot callers requesting us and how much do they have in the say about whether it's a Cahoots response or police response? Typically, if you say, I want Cahoots, we are going to be who shows up. It's going to take something pretty significant after you say, I need Cahoots, for it to then turn into that more traditional public safety response. Given that, there are some situations where somebody is calling us asking for Cahoots. For instance, there was a patient we used to see constantly with significant self-harm, to the really needing a paramedic response every time that they harmed themselves. But there was so much trauma built up from their life of having these firefighters, these paramedics show up and disregard the underlying issues, disregard the real emotional impact of their presence and that lack of a therapeutic response. And we would see them afterwards to really process how terrible this response had been from the fire department. And so we went to dispatch and we went to our partners and said, look, this is going to end badly. She is not going to survive one of these situations if you continue to send the fire department. Our teams are prepared emotionally and physically to respond, so please give us those calls from her first. If it's so severe that we can't handle it, then we will help her in that process of receiving care from the fire department. We also really work with people throughout the community on how you ask for us. So sometimes that means don't say, the most extreme thing that comes to your head because you just want somebody to come, but really keep it simple. Say, I need Cahoots for counseling. Doesn't matter what that counseling is. Dispatch shouldn't be asking more details about that. They don't need to know. All they know is that you're experiencing a crisis, you're asking for counseling from Cahoots, and so that's the response that you should get. Let me see here. The question around funding through police and how that influences us structurally. I don't know how clear it was, but we are a consensus-based collective. Chelsea and I are a pretty reasonable aesthetic representation of most of our team. I don't think we could be much further from the police department or from the fire department. That means that if we want to change the color of paint in our break room, it's got to go through a consensus process. We have a horizontal power structure, which means that it couldn't be any different.
No bosses.
No bosses, yeah.
Just a few.
Yeah.
On our team, on our staff, in our community.
Can you repeat your question?
That was,
Yeah.
It was asked about people of color. Do you have people of color staff?
Yeah, and it's, our community looks so much different than Oakland in that way, of course. And our community is very white, and our team is very white. We are extremely queer, as is our community, but that is a barrier that we have because pervasive throughout our services available in the county. I am often working and hear the police department airing over the entire radio system, do we have anybody who speaks Spanish right now? They will ask us, do you have somebody who speaks Spanish, because we're on a call and we are not able to accommodate that at all. So it is absolutely something that is not being adequately addressed, both by us and the community. We do have a few people of color on our team, but that is probably proportionate to like the statistics of our town itself, but because we work with all of the populations that we work with, it's underrepresented for sure.
So thank you so much. I think we have time for just these last two questions. So how do you deal with liability issues? Have you ever been sued? And have there been violent interactions that threaten the program? That's one. Second question is, for the small percentage of scenarios you felt escalating to police has been necessary, are there alternative outcomes you've been able to envision, like given that you had appropriate resources and power to eliminate police entirely, which is something we talk about all the time in the Bay Area?
So on the liability side, insurance and everything, that's my wheelhouse. We have pretty aggressive insurance. We really, like I said, we spend at least 500 hours training somebody before they go into the field as part of a two-person team. The joke is you either make it 6 weeks or 6 years with our program as a staff member. And so kind of that first line of liability is this person a good fit? Are they culturally responsive? Do they have that unconditional positive regard? How do they respond to that hate speech? How do they respond to that derision from community members who are really just focused on, really maintaining that NIMBY platform that, you're just here to enable those folks. When it comes to the issue of physical violence, for the 30 years that we've been doing this, we've never had a member of our team injured as a result of an interaction with a patient. And that really is because we are part of Whitebird Clinic, which has had that rapport and that relationship with our community for 50 years. We might be waking you up. Thank goodness it's us that's waking you up. But you're bleary-eyed, you can't really make out that face yet. You see this beard and these glasses, and who's that guy? But you can see the Whitebird on my shirt. And you know that Whitebird Clinic is who is waking you up. And that's going to completely change the kind of response that we get. We're voluntary. We're not going to inflict care on somebody, and we're not going to take your rights away because we show up on scene.
Sorry, I'm stealing the fun question. Okay, so for the small percentage of scenarios where we have to engage law enforcement, what is the dream alternative? More Cahoots vans. I would love if I would be able to get on the radio and ask for my coworkers who I trust in escalated situations. Maybe we just need more bodies, because maybe having a full Cahoots team engaged with one escalated party with the other, there's 6 of us being able to totally handle a situation. Listening to this radio all the time and hearing the things that every available officer goes code 3 lights and sirens through the town. Prior to my being on this team, I would think like, wow, that's an emergency. And now, like, those types of scenarios can often respond in them being like, oh, it was just a Cahoots client, and they're gonna hand that over to us. So I'm pretty disillusioned around that, because that creates such an environment of fear for the community too. Like, what does it feel like to be sitting, having dinner with your family and friends, and you have 3 cop cars whiz by your house, lights and sirens? Like, at least a somatic anxiety response, at least, then much less your trauma history. What is that going to remind you of? What does that look like for you? A lot of different things for a lot of people. And I know that can mean somebody who's just like acting weird in a 7-Eleven, but because a 7-Eleven employee has had too many people act weird today, they're saying this person's trying to rob me, and they're drunk across the counter just trying to grab the beer that they didn't have enough money to pay for. But that person, what law enforcement hears over the radio is active robbery at 7-Eleven, and then you hear it activate, and it's like, oh my God, that has to be so-and-so who we just saw in that area. All right, come on. Something that I shared in the smaller group of folks that we were talking with earlier was when, even on a call where law enforcement responds, and maybe it ends up to be a Cahoots call, when police have interaction with anyone that also almost always means that their name is going to be ran over the radio with dispatch, and they are checking this person for warrants, and they're also getting the information about this person's history. And it's not every year they made it on the honor roll and their great job they do in the community. It is anytime they made it on paper for being arrested. So we hear these really benign people in the community who we love to interact with, because when we show up on a call, our mentality is, how can I make this situation better, not how can I take this person's rights away? And so when they give that name to dispatch and they're being told every bad thing that this person has ever done, anytime that somebody has said, like, I'm gonna kill you if you arrest me, now every time that person interacts with law enforcement, sometimes every day, multiple times a day, they're being told, and this person has alerts for threatening to kill police officers. This person is known to carry syringes in their left pocket because maybe once in 1998 they had syringes in their left pocket. So that mentality in what could even be like just somebody sleeping on the sidewalk, that's the voice in their ear. That is like the little devil on my shoulder in this work, that I'm constantly trying to provide another voice and presence. So I know that these big Code 3 responses could be handled by Cahoots in a different world. That is perhaps very possible. I would love if Cahoots had an ambulance. I would love if our folks who are medics had higher certifications, if we were able to operate independently and provide care en route medically, which we do not do now.
Awesome. This has been so awesome. Thank you so much. Let's thank Team in Chelsea. And we also want to thank our council president, Rebecca Kaplan. We want to thank Coalition for Police Accountability, Faith in Action, Urban Strategies Council, the City of Oakland Police Commission, and everyone else who had a part of bringing Chelsea and Tim here with us. We are going to make Oakland better together. Amen? Thank you for being a part of what we all need. Thanks for being here.